So we all want to live in a world that is clean and flourishing, and we want to live healthily in it and feel liberated and free from discrimination. But health inequality happens because whilst the climate crisis affects all of us, it doesn't affect us all equally. And people who are disadvantaged due to poverty or racially minoritized or facing gender inequality or people with disabilities, all these people bear a much greater burden of the health impacts of the climate crisis than people who are not from these groups. And not only are the burden unequally experienced, but there's unequal responsibility for the cause of this crisis. So the relationship between climate and health inequality is the fact that those who contribute the most suffer the least, and those who contribute the least suffer the most. And that is health inequality, and that is injustice, and that is violence. There's documented racial inequalities as a result of air pollution, heat, and also deaths and illnesses from disasters. So that's a very direct thing that happens. So people die as a result of each of these things, but also they face worse health outcomes as well. And this can be mental health outcomes. It can be due to it can be outcomes related to heart disease, due to stroke, arthritis, and all of this can be due to a variety of ways that the climate is changing. And it affects people differently based on their race, their caste, their skin color, their migratory status, and their religion, to name a few. And it happens across the course of life, from an unborn baby being born with a low birth weight to a mother in Northern Africa, right the way to an older adult who's suffering from mercury-related poisoning in the Amazon rainforest. So it shows us that the health and the climate emergency is a health emergency, and it's also an unequal emergency. So there's many ways in which the climate crisis can impact on health in the UK. I'll give a couple of examples, but they mainly surround heat-related illnesses, cold-related illnesses, flooding and disasters, infectious diseases that are likely to, really increase in the future as the planet gets warmer, but also as the planet gets warmer and the weather is more volatile, we also have to deal with food insecurity, which impacts on health as well. And I can't obviously ignore the energy crisis that we're in as well, and how that is related to the climate crisis and then impacts on our health as well. So a little bit about each of these. So when it comes to heat, when a person is living in an area where there's high temperatures, higher temperatures than normal, then this can directly cause death, especially in older people. But also, if you're consistently in an area of exposure to heat, then this can change your it can lead to biological changes in your body through stress. And this can lead to things like stroke and heart disease and worsening arthritis, and also really poor mental health. Heat can also affect your sleep quality as well, and it can lead to insomnia. And these things can affect your ability to develop diabetes and obesity and other hormonal problems as well. So just heat can result in all of these different health impacts. So we've done heat. So cold weather, we know that there are a large number of preventable deaths that happen in the winter in the UK. And again, this is a result of the climate crisis because of our reliance on fossil fuels. And fossil fuels are extremely volatile, and they lead to price hikes, fuel price hikes, which sadly the most vulnerable people in society are hit with the health consequences of this. So what do people do? They don't turn on their heating because they're not able to afford heating. And what happens in a cold home, it's an area that is just thriving for illnesses such as respiratory problems, heat-related heart-related problems, and also high blood pressure and stroke as well. And then, of course, people can die from floods and other disasters that happen acutely as well. So storms we've seen recently, our recent storm has actually led to deaths in this country. That's just absolutely devastating that in a high-income country such as the UK, we don't have a system that's adapting and ready for these extreme weather events that are going to get worse. And finally, infectious diseases as well. So as temperatures rise, we'll see a change in the epidemiology of illnesses such as malaria and dengue. We might see some of these illnesses in high-income countries in the global north, in the UK, where temperatures are quite low. So we'll see a change in some of these illnesses, and we need to be prepared to face them. And finally, we also talked about food poverty and food insecurity. A lot of our food is still imported, where in the UK we're not very food secure. We have food deserts in the UK, with the poorest people suffering from food poverty and malnutrition and also obesity at the same time. So we have, once the climate crisis affects the areas in which we're dependent on for food, then this will result in insecurity for us because we won't be able to import it, etc. So these are some of the ways in which the climate crisis will have an impact on the health of people in the UK. There's also air pollution that we can talk about. So obviously air pollution is a really important determinant of health. It can cause death directly, but it can also cause really chronic illnesses, especially a particle called PM2. Well, there's many different particulate matters, but PM10, PM2.5, each of these particles can get lodged in the lungs of people all across the life course and really result in some devastating illnesses. And this, again, happens unequally because of the way that our environment is structured. We have the poorest people living in areas breathing this air. We have racially minoritized people living in these areas breathing this air, even though they're not the ones who are driving vehicles or burning wood burners that are causing these issues. So that's, again, unequal and unjust. My research that's unpublished and was part of my master's thesis was investigating environmental racism against children in the UK. And it was using the Millennium Cohort Study, which is a study of 18,000 families in the UK, children born in the year 2000. And it found that non-white children are 19 times more likely to live in areas of high air pollution compared to white children. And that's once you've even accounted for their social status. So that is just on the basis of race, ethnicity. And there's also research from a group called the Centric Lab, and they've shown that single parent households, which are majority women, majority racialized women who are more likely to experience financial stress and social isolation and shift work, have worse outcomes as a result of where they live, as a result of heat as well. So when there's high heat exposure, these are the women who are these are the households that suffer due to more heat-related stress. They're more likely to be exposed to high levels of air pollution because they're traveling and using public transport. They are also more likely to be cleaners or care workers, and that exposes them to chemicals as well. So we're looking at this group, this demographic of racially minoritized working class women. They are an incredibly vulnerable group in the UK for which there's evidence that they have more unequal health outcomes. And as the climate crisis worsens, this is a group that we're really going to have to support. So I think ultimately, when you look at this group and you see what this group is, it's not only things like politics and the social system and the economic system and the environment that we live in and housing. It's moving a step beyond that and actually looking at colonial mindsets, our structures, white supremacy, cis heteropatriarchy, all of these things that are actually the root causes of all these systems that then result in the climate crisis. So in our workplaces, as health professionals, as any professionals, or as campaigners or organizers, we need to make sure that we're not seeing the climate crisis as a result of social, political, economic systems, but pushing it further to this is about colonial capitalism, this is about ableism, this is about cis heteropatriarchy. So it's a symptom of, as I said, a much deeper sickness. I don't think so. I really hope not. There is definitely more funding on health inequality. But what I find as a health professional who also cares about the climate crisis and like work and organizes for climate justice is that the health community often has, carbon tunnel vision. So they just look mostly at emission reduction and, okay, what can we do in our hospitals? What can we do in our operating theatres? Which is all very important for sustainability as a whole. But I think we sometimes forget that it's about social justice. So I think that's potentially why there's not enough momentum in the UK, both in terms of funders, but also researchers to look at environmental racism. The other thing to mention is that we don't need more evidence to show that this is a problem. We know that this is a problem. There is some evidence, but as you say, there isn't enough research on how to tackle it. There isn't enough research on what communities who are facing it want to happen when it comes to their health outcomes. But I would definitely recommend the Centric Lab as one space. And at Race and Health, we're really trying to do some more research on environmental racism in health. Who else do I recommend? MedAct is a group that's doing a lot of work, as you know, the People's Health Movement, the UK chapter of that, Students for Global Health. But again, when it comes to research, I totally agree that there isn't any, but is there a bias? I really hope not, and I haven't seen it or witnessed it myself as a researcher, but I think there's perhaps not as much momentum as there is in the US, because environmental justice is very much a US concept. Environmental justice, there's very few people in the UK who even write research saying that it's about environmental justice. So I think there is definitely a gap. So more new oil and gas exploration anywhere, including the UK, has huge negative implications for public health, and it worsens health inequalities. So as we've seen over the last couple of months, our reliance on fossil fuels shows us that they are very volatile, and we have an energy system that doesn't serve those who need it. But also within our country, we have people, as I say, a high income country in the global north. We have the poorest households, and even, households that weren't classified as fuel poor are becoming fuel poor as well. Whilst the richest people grow richer, and fossil fuel giants like Shell are reporting sky-high profits that could be used to help us get out of the situation. So this is a choice that people are making. And as I've explained previously, cold homes, fuel poverty results in poor health in a variety of different ways. So when it comes to public health implications, yes, it impacts on people's health in the UK through fuel poverty, but also it has a massive impact on our brothers and sisters and our siblings all around the world. We know that countries in the global north are responsible for 92% of global CO2 emissions, whereas countries in the global south only make up 8% of emissions. And this is historically speaking. And what this is a process of atmospheric colonization, as Jason Hickel calls it. So the source of the disaster is not in the atmosphere, but we see it playing out along colonial lines in the atmosphere. We also know that the richest 1% of people are responsible for double the emissions of the poorest 50%. So more new oil and gas fields, any extra approved oil and gas field will directly lead to deaths and suffering. And any oil and gas field that we're stopping is actually lives saved and health gained for everybody. So how it manifests and how the public health implications manifests are directly through the UK government's actions. And the UK is responsible for causing climate damages, and these damages disproportionately fall on the global south, but also within our own country. It's the people who are the most racially minoritized, financially minoritized, and also facing gender inequality and disability as well. So it has humongous public health implications, very overwhelmingly negative public health implications. And all of this globally will also lead to displacement of people, which again has significant implications for mental health. We'll see more climate migration, more climate refugees, which will also lead to worsening health for this group of people who's already minoritized. So as I said before, the more the UK explores oil and gas, the more damage it is doing to the health of people, not only in the UK, but all over the world. So we have a choice. We can either stop or we can keep going with damaging people's health. And I think the other thing I want to mention is often when we see this thing of the climate crisis, it's seen as, okay, let's throw technical solutions to it. Let's do emission reduction. Let's add net zero to the back of it, or let's even slap health onto it. So we see a lot of that as well. But none of that is effective because we're seeing sustainability not as social justice. I think it's time that we actually reclaim sustainability as a social justice issue so we can actually join hands with everyone who cares and stop seeing the climate crisis as this abstract thing and instead see it as this is about our health. This is about the health of everybody, the planet, the people, and everything else living in it. So in summary, I just want to, I suppose, finish by saying that any new exploration of oil and gas is something that we don't need. We need to instead prioritize the health of our population, the health of our public. And if we're going to prioritize that, then it starts with the UK saying no to new oil and also pushing North Sea oil and gas to pay its taxes. And then reparations for the damage that that North Sea oil and gas has already done to people in the UK and globally. And if we're going to do that, then we need to do it with ambition. And the health community is very ready. We're here we can offer skills, we can offer solidarity, and we can offer research, organising power, and we can try to be a voice for justice as well. But it can only happen if we see that the struggle for health as well as the struggle for the planet are the same thing, and it is about justice.